Welcome to Pete's Property Podcast, brought to you by Buyers and hosted by Pete Wargent, buyer's agent, finance and real estate expert, and all-round property guru, plus published author. Join Pete for 30 minutes as he chats all things property with a new guest each week. Learn practical tips from the movers and shakers in the property industry and well-known personalities sharing their property journeys.
G'day, welcome to the Pete Wargent Property Pod. I'm really excited today to have an extra special guest. I've got none other than Cate Bakos, the president of REBAA, the Real Estate Buyers Agency Association in Australia. Cate, welcome. It's great to have you on.
Oh, you're not as excited as I am, Pete. Thanks so much for asking me. Loved seeing that invite in the inbox.
It's nice to be on the other side of the microphone because I actually came on the Cate Bakos podcast earlier in the year, so kind of returning the favour today. So really excited to have a half-hour chat with you in a more formal environment. We usually do it over pizza down in Melbourne. So
there'll be plenty of time for that.
Yeah, so we'll have a good chat today. So I'll just run through a quick bio for anyone who's not familiar. So I think I heard on another podcast that you actually originally studied chemistry at Monash University, but long had a passion for property and got into the property market at 21, which we'll talk about a bit later on. I think I might be right in saying you cut your teeth later as a real estate agent and then a mortgage broker before finally landing in your passion in buyer's agency. And you set up the Cate Bakos property business in Melbourne in 2014. So I think I've got all of that right. Is that right?
You absolutely have. In the right order. I'm very impressed.
Yes, I do try to do my background research, but can sometimes get the chronology wrong. But I think a lot of people would know you because you're a very regular commentator in the media. You're in the Fin Review most weeks, always in the papers, on live TV. And you were Buyer's Agent of the Year, I think, in 2018 for the YIP magazine. And also, I always see your name popping up in the Telstra Businesswoman of the Year nomination. So I think a lot of people would have seen you in the media anyway. As I mentioned, president of REBAA, also a prominent member of HIPAA, qualified property investment advisor. So you've got all of the qualifications, and I think published author as well, Successful Property Investment, which was published in 2016. As I mentioned, you've also got a podcast. So I guess across all platforms, we hear a lot from Cate, and in your own personal life, you built your own sizable property portfolio with your hubby, well known, of course, in Melbourne's inner west community. So do you ever read your own bio and go like, wow, that's a pretty impressive resume?
You know what, you say it, Pete, and it sounds so good. I'll tell you about my bio, my CV. I remember chatting to someone in HR recruiter, and he literally described my CV as a patchwork quilt and said, so what do you actually want to do? And it did feel like that for a little bit because you spend a lot of time finding your groove. And I got quite close to it, but I didn't absolutely nail it until I discovered Buyer's Agency. And it wasn't really a well-known role back then. So I'd pieced together all the things I loved about the various roles that I'd had. And I worked out that I needed to be selecting property and guiding people through the process, helping them with dealing with agents, the negotiation phase, the due diligence, understanding their cash flows and targeting them to the right strategy. And that was really how it evolved. And I didn't go through a typical apprenticeship or introduction to a buyer's agent. I actually had to find my own way there and find other people that were doing it and understand the depths of their role and the breadths of the role and ask myself, is this what I want to do? And what type of buyer's agency do I want to do? Because as you know, there's so many different facets and different things that you can specialise in. So in answer to your question, do I look at my CV and think it sounds impressive? No, I look at it and see all of the work that I've done that's culminated in creating the business that I've got and the style of advocacy that I've embraced. But it was a very long and hard road at the beginning.
Yeah, it's a fair point, isn't it? I think it's all too common in life for people to judge the book on the chapter they come in on, and they don't see all of the hard work and the false starts and the change of careers and the change of jobs and all of the things and the experience that led you to where you are today. I recently watched a Charlie Munger interview, and he said a bit of his life advice, I guess, in his 90s these days. He said, try and find something that you just really enjoy doing. And whenever I see you pop up in the media or on TV, I always just get the sense of you just seem to be in your element and just really enjoying what you do. Were you always a natural in the role, or did you have to learn as you went along?
Oh, it's a good question. I look at the buyer's agent that I was back in 2010 and the buyer's agent I am now, and I've learned so much, but I continue to learn so much every single day. I am in my element. I absolutely love it. And when people apologise for calling me on a Sunday, or when the deal is going late into Friday night and I'm stepping out of an important dinner and they're saying sorry, I just keep saying to them, don't say sorry. This is what you're paying me for. And you know what? I love it. And it's true. So it's been a long journey, and I was in my element at the start of it as well, but I was very mindful of what I didn't know. And I think that's a measure of a good advocate. You've really got to understand what you can control and what you need to know that you can't control, because that will determine whether you reject a property or talk to a client differently. But obviously, when you don't know everything that you need to know, you've got to skill up very quickly, and you've got to have amazing people around you, including good conveyancers and solicitors. The legal side of things, that's critical. And I think the right amount of training is really vital. And I have talked about this before, and I don't want it to be a theme today. I've got a problem with short courses and short accreditation. I've got a problem with mutual recognition for insufficiently trained BAs, because it can land you in trouble if you don't know what you don't know. And I remember doing 26 modules back in 2010 to get my Cert 4 under my belt. I had to take time off work, and it took me the better part of 6 months. And it was very full on, lots of assignments, lots of online exams and one-on-one assessments with qualified people. And I learnt a lot in that time, and I never begrudge it. I was so pleased I got the chance to do that. But I think that's a really critical thing for anyone in this industry.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think of all the things you need to look for in a buyer's agent, and I guess you're probably known as one of the most experienced and skilled in the industry, but you would always want to look for experience. I think, as you say, sometimes the barriers to entry in real estate aren't high enough necessarily, depending on the role that people are qualifying for. As you know, my professional career, I qualified as a chartered accountant. It was 3 years of exams, but also 3 years of experience before you could get the qualification. And when I meet somebody else who's a chartered accountant, I just know what they've been through to get that qualification. Sometimes I think in real estate, the exams and the modules are quite short, and you want to know that somebody's actually been out there, like yourself, in the real world, year in, year out, doing the hard yards. And I think potentially the industry is moving in the right direction, getting people to get a year of experience, ideally, before they set up their own shop. Now, I mentioned just before there that you studied chemistry at Monash, if I've done my research correctly, but it dawned on me that I didn't really know much about your actual background. Like, where did you grow up, and what did your parents do, and what was your upbringing actually like?
It was a great upbringing. I was the eldest of 3 kids, and my parents took on my cousins. So for a lot of years in my family, there were 5 kids. My dad was self-employed all of my childhood. He ran a local stereo shop down on the peninsula. So I grew up down on the beach. My mum was a trained nurse, and with 5 kids under her wing, she didn't do nursing for a little while and then went back part-time. So I grew up around very industrious parents, very hardworking, very conservative. And I'm okay to say that on this show, because I've told them again and again that they were too conservative. And, mum and dad paid the house down as quickly as they could. They avoided debt because debt was bad. They made sure that we had the best education that they could afford. They had a really good study regime. My dad even took the TV away when I turned 12. So I grew up in my teenage years without a television, and I can't tell you how much schoolyard bullying that created for me. I could not relate to Neighbours or Home and Away or anything, because I was the Amish kid with no TV. And it was probably brutal at the time, but in hindsight, great, because we all played a musical instrument. We all studied something relatively scientific, and mum and dad did set a great example. I couldn't wait to leave Sorrento, though, And people think that sounds crazy because it's very pretty if you're on holidays and you've got money. But when you're a local and you haven't got money, it's quite different. So the way that I relate to leaving Sorrento was for anyone who's seen Muriel's wedding, when she leaves Porpoise Spit. when I turned 18 and got into Monash and packed the Hyundai and left to live in town, I kind of felt like those girls were in that when they were in that taxi leaving Porpoise Spit. It was very cool, and I had the independence that I wanted, and I was moving to the big smoke. And I have to say, Clayton isn't particularly exciting, and it's not really very big smoke, but it was the start of, you know, my independence and embracing Melbourne.
Yeah, there's a lot of familiar themes there, actually. I grew up in a family of 5 kids. My parents were the same. It was always pay down the mortgage as quickly as you can, big emphasis on education. And I think, actually, we had a period with no TV as well, which is like a living hell when you're a kid. It's funny that things have come full circle, because these days I never watch television. I think occasionally might catch a bit of cricket or business news, but I just don't spend any time in front of the television, because you can do other things with your time that's so much more productive and get out there in
volumes. That does, because people say to me, how do you do a weekly blog and 2 weekly podcasts and good? Anyway, I would say the same thing, Pete Wargent, how do you do a daily blog? And you've just hit the nail on the head. It's choosing what to do with your time. Something's got to be really compelling for me to sit in front of the TV and pay attention.
Yes, not necessarily a rewatch of Muriel's wedding, but I like to get outside these days and, you know, go and exercise or get in the garden, because TV, I think it's okay for people if you use it as relaxation or time to get away from work, but you can waste so many hours in front of the screen when you could be doing things like qualifications or learning or just reading or socialising. There's so much more to the world to do. And whenever I catch up with you, you always seem to be on the go and doing stuff. And you don't strike me as the sort of person who'd spend too much time in front of the TV. So tell us about how you even got into the idea of real estate or property and getting on the property ladder. Because as you mentioned, when you grow up sometimes with parents who've taken a very conservative route to personal finance, it's not necessarily something that's inherited, that idea. So it must have come into your life at some point. So how did you even get onto the property ladder in the first place, and how did the idea come about?
I didn't really get that from my family or parental influence, you're right. And I just had a really sound family unit and very stable upbringing, and high expectations. So mum and dad expected us, and particularly me. I was, the eldest. I was their only girl. I was the first in my generation to go to university. I was the first in the family to go to university. So that expectation was already set in stone. There was no way in hell they were seeing me go and work for the local real estate agent at age 18 and get my experience under my belt that way. There was no discussion of real estate. Even when I would go to auctions and guesstimate what properties in my local township would sell for, and I was in my teens at that stage, my dad would say that I wasn't bad at valuing, but I was going to study medicine. And I didn't get into med, and thank goodness, because I can't stand lacerations or blood, and I don't cope well with death. So I would have been a really lousy doctor anyway. But, the consultative side of that appealed, and that stayed with me. I knew that I wanted something advisory and nurturing, and something that carried responsibility, and something that requires a lot of EQ. So I was totally down with the idea of doing something along the lines of general practitioning, but just not with blood and lacerations and yucky things. And then I studied science because that's what I got into, and I didn't love it. And I fell into chemistry because I got some really good grades in my 3rd year, and I was invited to do honours. And it was almost like a burden, because I thought I could be free to get out and go and get a job, and all of a sudden I'm facing a 4th year in a lab, which is not exciting if you're a social person and you hate chemistry. And my dad looked at me like I was an alien and said, "What do you mean you're thinking about it? It looks like you're doing honours." So I did do honours, but in that time I really wasn't enjoying it, and I was paying attention to everything else, including working part-time at night in a Coles deli. And night managing in a Coles deli comes with really good income for someone who's not used to that kind of income. My job at Coles, getting the penalty rates during the night and the weekends, paid better than a graduate chemist role, which is quite a strange thing to consider, because I was studying chemistry to have this career that I could get out and use. And I ended up saving a lot of money at Coles, and my driver was just to buy my first house. I was really keen to have that little piece of paradise that belonged to me. And it wasn't at that stage about building wealth. It was about building freedom. I thought to myself, if I can have a property that I can quickly pay down, I can then focus my efforts on what I want to do and not have to be a chemist. I can think about something else. I can retrain, I can travel, Anyway, I got the bug. I jumped into property in a year that things were moving in Melbourne. I bought off the plan, which was an insane thing to do. It was a townhouse in a good spot, but nothing else about that acquisition was clever other than picking a good spot and making sure it had some land on title. And I realised my mistake pretty quickly. I was doing a lot of reading at that stage and mainly reading. We didn't do podcasts back then. And I thought to myself, I should have bought a house that was more run down on better land in a good spot. And so when it came close to settlement and the builder was wanting to buy the property back for a premium, I realised I'd already made a profit. So I lived in the townhouse for a bit, then bought the property closer to the water down in Seaford, and it was on huge land. And that was clever. And I could pay it right down. I think I got close to paying it off completely. I had a mortgage of $20,000 and had this thing that was quite valuable. The mistake that I made was selling and buying. I didn't appreciate accessing equity and keeping, but I quickly got my head around that when I met a broker who told me I was making some key mistakes. And the rest is history. I was watching as a 22-year-old. I was into my second property thinking, this is actually quite lucrative. And if you understand risk and understand your own capacity to repay things and just work it as aggressively as you can within reason, you could build some pretty good wealth before you have to start worrying about kids and family and all of the things that can slow you down. So that was my driver. And once I got to play with a lending calculator, I think I was driving my broker insane. I kept asking him for scenarios because I think that's a really good way to build your own portfolio. You can slot in all of the numbers and have a look at the cost of borrowing and all of the outgoings. And he just said, I'm a bit sick of you. Here's the calculator. So I had a NAB calculator and I just ran every scenario until I'd mapped out a strategy. And that was on a really small income because even then, you know, as a graduate chemist and then going sideways into a marketing role, I was working at Dulux by that stage, I still wasn't earning huge money. So I was having to work out what sort of properties I could buy that gave me an opportunity to keep buying. And as you know, you've got to look at a higher yield, so stronger rental returns to keep your borrowing capacity up when you're not a high income earner. And that was how it all came about.
Do you want to save on buyer's agent fees? You could save thousands with Buyers Buyers. As Australia's most extensive network of buyer's agents, we can lock in highly competitive prices. Plus, our national network of buyer's agents are some of the best in the business. So get the Buyers Buyers advantage and talk to us today. Call 1-800-975-051 or visit buyersbuyers.com.au.
When I was working at Deloitte, there was a guy who used to, one of the managers there who's now a partner, a guy called Rob Knight. I remember him sitting there one day and saying, you know what, if we worked at Tesco and did all the overtime and worked the night shifts and the weekends, you would dead set be earning way more than a manager at Deloitte would be. And we sort of took that with a pinch of salt. But when you sit down and do the numbers, it was probably pretty much on the button, you know, compared to the number of hours we were doing in professional services. So I think, as you said, I mean, when it comes to getting on the housing ladder and getting on that first rung, it's largely a question of just doing whatever you have to do to get the deposit together. And we actually signed up to do the marathon one year and said, right, I'm not even going to socialise. We're not going to go to the pub, no restaurants, nothing, until we've saved that damn deposit to buy this place we wanted down on Darling Harbour. And it was excruciating when everyone else was going out to the opera bar on Friday nights. But as you said, it's largely just a question of doing whatever you have to do. Because like yourself, I saw people with property portfolios. I was thinking that is a way you can get to freedom. And I think another interesting theme you introduced there is the idea of actually investing before you got families and commitments and monthly repayments weighing you down, because life can get pretty big on you in that regard. Like yourself, we just took that same view. We're saying, why don't we do the investing before we've got all those commitments? Because it's so much easier to get the deposits and the equity and start building the portfolio. And that was pretty much how we did it too. You kind of maxed out the borrowing capacity before the kids came along. So you mentioned that you went into some higher yielding properties to try and just keep the portfolio growing and moving along. And then presumably you've subsequently also upgraded your personal home to a bigger place. Because I think I must have seen on Instagram some reno photos from the Bakos reno. Tell us a bit about the next step in the journey for you.
Yeah, I never prioritised the dream home until I felt that the journey was well on its way. And to your point, I had to make a few sacrifices to really kick this off. I had people also telling me I was insane. I had a university professor saying I was throwing away a good opportunity and I was headed for a second-class honours. And, in academia, that's not acceptable. You need a first class if you want to go on, if you want a master's and PhD. I got a second-class honours, but I came out with a property. So I managed to get borrowing capacity and a pre-approval during my time as a student, which I think is insane, because I was paying peppercorn rent and living with my brother and fighting every day and putting on the red Coles hat and, cleaning chicken rotisseries and getting home around 2:30 every morning. And I was really burning the candle at both ends. I had my parents saying I was throwing everything away because I was working too hard at Coles. I amassed an awesome little fortune that at that time I well and truly had 20% deposit covered. For me, it was all about minimising what my repayment schedule would look like once I gave up Coles and went into chemistry, which sounds ridiculous. It was certainly, involving a lot of sacrifice. And the house that I bought after selling the townhouse, you could smell it from the street. It had squatters in it. And I reckon the land to asset ratio on that was about 105%. It was more valuable when the house was gone. And my mum wouldn't come in. She stood in the street and looked like she wanted to cry and thought I was silly. But it was a big site, really close to the water. And at that stage could have had a 3-unit site subdivision rolled out for it. So I have no regrets whatsoever. And I wasn't planning on going into academia. And I look at what I've set up and established and learnt now. I think the biggest reward out of all of my crazy adventures at the start were the learnings. You can't buy that. And you can't take those risks with clients, but you can take them for yourself. So I definitely learnt a lot. And sometimes people ask me about how my strategy changed over the years, and it changed as a reflection of my income. I could start looking at good capital growth assets, and I could target quality properties, and I could avoid some of the social issues that I certainly got my fair share of at the start. And there's no way to sugarcoat that. If you're going to the bottom quartile type of property in an area that has low socioeconomic, incomes and issues that you're dealing with, you will get your fair share of horrific phone calls and yucky Saturday night experiences. So I've weathered all of that and learnt so much, but the strategy did change, and it changed when I wanted to focus on higher quality properties that would deliver good capital growth, and I didn't need to be focusing on the cash flow properties quite as much. But having said that, I could have got rid of them and sold a lot of our properties that gave us grief in the early days, but I look at them now, they're all paid down. They're spinning a really good rental return. I mean, back at the time, I bought 5 in South Australia and all of them were netting double-digit rental yields, all of them. They were houses, so it's not like I had OC fees or strata fees to contend with. I just had rates and really minimal land tax because we paid peppercorns for them. I think the most expensive house I bought at the time when I bought those 5 was $73,000, and the cheapest was, from memory, 62.5. So the combined outlay for all 5 of those was equivalent to what you'd buy in one city for one property. So it was an interesting journey. And we got our family home that we're in now, and it's our forever home. I absolutely love it. Bought it in 2012, And I did treat that as an assignment like I would for a client. So I had a very strict criteria list, understood my must-haves and my nice-to-haves. I didn't compromise on anything. I recognised all of the pockets within Yarraville that I was interested in targeting and all of the areas that offered a terraced house because I wanted a terrace. And, there are 11 possible contenders at the time, and I just waited until the first one came up.
Yeah, it's always interesting, isn't it? You look back on your journey and, you can always say, I might have done something differently. But, no end of times clients come to me and say, look, it's a bit embarrassing. I made this decision, 10 years ago. And the thing is, I don't think anybody has ever come to me and said everything went perfectly. All you can do really is the best that you can do at that time. And exactly like yourself, we've taken a view like buy property, renovate it, never sell it. And as a result, we've got a bit of a patchwork portfolio too. We've got some, random properties in regional areas because that's all we could afford at various times. And we've got some, small one-bed units that we bought because that was literally all the budget would do. As you said, the market can be quite forgiving over the long run. You can always just look back and say you might have done things a bit differently, but you just take the lessons and keep moving forward. Interesting point there actually on the regional versus city sort of aspect or debate, because earlier on when we were talking, you sort of talked about going to the big smoke and the excitement of getting away, sort of the Muriel's wedding thing. I can remember going to Sydney as a very young man. I grew up in a small city in a small town. And when I came to Sydney, I found the whole experience was almost literally intoxicating. I was so excited to be in a big city, and there was 24-hour pubs, and there was, the tabs were different, the sport was different, the people were completely different. I just found the whole experience overwhelmingly exciting. But of course, in the last 18 months, 2 years, there's been a big shift away from the cities because of a pandemic. Where do you think things will land in the long run? Do you think there'll be this sort of regional shift, or do you think people will work remotely on the Sunshine Coast or Gold Coast, or do you think people will gravitate back towards the cities once the borders reopen?
I love this question. I think this pandemic has reshaped all of us. There are lasting effects that will never disappear. And part of that is how we've all been forced to embrace tech, how our employers have looked at how we work and how to maximise productivity. I think you have to strike a balance, and getting the best out of your people definitely involves being flexible and allowing them to thrive in the environment that they need to thrive in. And for many, we're starting to see that that's a hybrid arrangement. People do want to feel connected. They do still want to learn. They want to be able to demonstrate to their bosses how they're going. Particularly younger workers, they're not keen to be sitting at home in their bedroom on Zoom all day. They need to pay attention to expanding their opportunities and demonstrating how they're thriving in their career. But for a lot of people, especially working parents, having that hybrid arrangement and that flexibility allows you to do the parenting tasks that you want to do that ordinarily you couldn't. If you've got a 9-to-5 job and you're 5 days a week and you've got to shuttle the kids off to childcare and be in your chair at your desk by 8:30, dressed up and ready to go, that puts a lot of pressure on people. But if you've got a hybrid arrangement and one of you can walk the kids to school one day and the other's in the office, etc., I'm seeing the benefits of that right now as an employer, and I wouldn't want to change things. So I think that's something that is here to stay. What I think will be elastic, though, is our love affair for our cities. And that's not just the major cities, but also, the large regions as well. None of us want to be cooped up at home and not integrating with our friends at work and being part of the city vibe. So I think that people will return to loving the cities, including the capital cities. And if anything, if I was a bit contrarian right now and I was allowed to buy more property, which I'm not, I would probably think about doing something close to the CBD, because we've seen everything else take off and just gallop leaps and bounds. And we've seen certainly good units in the city haven't gone up at the rate that you'd expect them to. And when I say good units, great floor plans, tame OC fees, buildings that don't have issues and special levies, anything that is offering really great amenity. It might be by the water or easy to walk into certain villages. I think that there will be a swing back, So I'm not thinking that the regions will continue to reign and outperform the capital cities long term. They certainly have over the last year, though, and even looking at the CoreLogic data that came out 2 days ago, regions have continued to pip the capital cities on a national basis, monthly, quarterly and annually. So the last 2 years have been the years of the regions. I think what COVID has done for our regions, particularly those that offer everything that you need, that a capital city would offer. So, for example, jobs, hospitals, education, they will continue to flourish. And it's really put them on the map, and it's made people aware of the fact that you can have a wonderful lifestyle in a region. But I think the regions that are dislocated and don't offer those things, we could see a bounce back with value. So I'm really reluctant to support someone paying megabucks at the peak of the market during heightened pandemic fear to do an escape to the country or an escape to the coast when where they're escaping to isn't within an easy commute to what they need. I think that people will get sick of long commutes.
Yeah, it's a good time to be careful, I think. I mean, being somebody based in Noosa, the market has gone haywire in the last couple of years. But, people have quite short memories. And in the global financial crisis, a lot of those second homes were the first thing to go. I remember the New South Wales South Coast. There was loads of for sale signs all the way down the coast, and Noosa was the same, got walloped. I think you need to be a little bit careful in some of those coastal areas because, as you mentioned, places like Mornington and some of those markets have really gone gangbusters in the last year. Lots of the coastal markets in New South Wales and Queensland as well. I was talking to a friend of ours, mutual friend, Rich Harbin, who's talking about the potential for a contrarian buy, maybe at the Paris end of Melbourne CBD. And if you can find a nice established unit with a point of scarcity, I mean, relatively speaking, very cheap compared to what you would pay for some of the detached housing around the tracks. Let's talk a bit about Cate Bakos, the business, rather than Cate, the megastar agent. So as I keep reading in the Telstra Businesswoman Awards, you're always on those lists that come out. Obviously, you went out on your own in business. I assume, like everyone who starts their own business, that came with its own challenges. Have there been good and bad parts to that? And secondary question, tell us a bit about the advantages of using an expert buyer's agent like yourself, because presumably you've seen almost everything over the years, although I guess you're still learning too.
Yeah, I went out on my own in 2014, and that wasn't really in the plan. It came about really quickly. And as you know, I was a co-director at a firm in town, and I joined them in 2010. And I had a great experience in terms of being able to set up their property arm, and they've gone on to thrive, and they've got lots of buyers agents working with them now. So I carry a lot of pride from the work that I did there and what I established. But it was time for me to go. And I opened the doors in my little business in Yarraville in 2014. And it was a scary moment. I remember scoping out the bare minimum for what I needed. I wanted to just keep the finances under control and give myself every chance to fly without having, ridiculous financial commitment holding me back. And at that stage, my husband announced that he was going to give up work and be Mr. Mum at home. And I had a lot of pressure on me to make sure I could deliver and look after my family. And as you know, we had a lot of debt by then. We had properties and the commitments, and I was pretty nervous about doing that. But for me, there was no option to fail. It was going to be a success. And I've chatted to a photocopy guy from Fuji Xerox because, the copier, scanning, copying in your office. And I've got this big beast of a machine that has been with me ever since. And, without it, I'd be in trouble. But I remember saying, okay, I'm signing this, what do they call it, a hire purchase or a lease or whatever. So you're committing to the machine. And I said, just so that I'm aware, before I sign this, what happens if I don't need it anymore? And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, what happens if this business doesn't work and I have to give you the copier back? He said, well, the flag fall would be $11,000. That made me just gasp, and I thought, I'm really doing this. And $11,000, you'd put that on your list and just suck it up and deal with it. But at the time, it was a serious commitment, and I knew then this is not like rocking up to work, with your staff card and handing in your Amex and having your expenses ticked off. This is my expense, and I've got way more of these to come. So that was a sobering moment, but the rest is history. It was a wonderful time. I was very fortunate that the market conditions were buoyant then and for quite a few years. And I was able to put my own flavour on things and build the brand the way that I wanted to build it. My focus was on the client experience, so not just having a good time and getting a product that they were happy with, but also learning on the journey and feeling like they'd really been involved. And I haven't changed that. And in fact, a lot of people ask me, what's the next step? What will Cate Bakos Property do? Or what's your next goal? How do you want to change the business or grow the business? And honestly, I'm loving every day as it is. I don't have aspirations to grow the business or to change it. I've got it exactly where I want it and exactly where I enjoy it.
You've almost preempted there my penultimate question. So you mentioned you've got the family home down pat and the family's happy in situ, but I can't imagine you as somebody ever retiring. You don't seem like a person who can slow down very easily, but do you have a sense of what might be enough in terms of your portfolio and your net worth, and do you have any idea of what the end game might look like for Cate Bakos? Because I just can't picture in my head you just not being at the top buyer's agent, because that's all I've ever known you as.
I love what I do. I'm going to struggle to stop. If I wanted to stop, I could stop now. So when you ask, when is enough? I've got enough. I just love what I do. To comprehend what else I could do and do something a little bit more altruistic perhaps, and it might be focusing on education. It might be putting out more materials ultimately for people who can't afford buyer's agents to be able to look out for themselves a bit better, or it could be taking on a few more briefs that are gratis, and we do that now. And every quarter I make sure we've got a gratis client. So whether that's a local agent pointing out someone who really needs help and can't afford it, or someone else in my social circles, and I've had a lot of enjoyment in doing that. We just start working with them. Half the time my staff don't know that they might not be a fee-paying client, and they are so involved and so passionate about it, so driven and so grateful. And it is always a wonderful breath of fresh air when you're helping someone that didn't see it coming. So in terms of what's next, there are lots of things that I get excited about, doing interviews and stuff with you. We've toyed with the idea of writing together or doing something, in a podcast or an episode together. And they're the things that get me excited, day-to-day things. But long-term, I do want to try and leave my mark on the world in a really positive way. And this is the industry that I've chosen to do that because it's what I love and what I think I'm good at. So ultimately, I don't see me winding down and retiring, but I think I will have a look at what I can do in terms of moving into more educational space.
Yeah, it's a very much a people-based industry, isn't it? And you might look at it and think that some of the work might repeat or be a bit the same, but actually there's always different stories, and it's all about the people on their own respective journeys, and that's what can make it such an addictive industry, I suppose, for people. My final question is related to the property market outlook, because I always read in the media about chief economists and so on, but when I actually want the sort of lead indicators of what's happening in the here and now, and particularly the local trends, the best people I've always found to speak to are mortgage brokers and buyer's agents, because they, and I guess also auctioneers, because they see what's happening with a bit of a sneak preview, I guess, because you can see the trends at open homes and the mortgage applications and all of this stuff. So election year coming up, we've seen, I noticed yesterday there was something like 231,000 building approvals over the past year. So there's lots of new housing construction going on, but then immigration's going to start again pretty much forthwith into Sydney and Melbourne. So I guess a two-pronged question. Do you think the Aussie market will continue to do well next year as Melbourne reopens on that hedonism trade, or even in an election year? And the second part of the question, what do you think the Aussie property market will do over the next, say, 10 or 20 years? And what, if you were a sort of an investor today, what would you be looking for in terms of the right locations and properties and things like that?
Great questions. Wow. I'm happy to go on the record and say what I think. So this is crystal ball stuff, and I'm okay to revisit this in a year and see how wrong I was. I think the next year, despite it being an election year and despite talk about macroprudential restrictions, further restrictions, I think we'll have double-digit growth nationally, and I think Melbourne will continue to do okay. And Melbourne's playing catch-up. So when we look at some of the metrics now, particularly new listings, you can see a lot of cities are down on listings compared to this time last year. Melbourne's not the same because we've really had a difficult market that has been completely influenced by lockdowns. And we're the auction city. I know that there are other auction cities, but Melbourne has traditionally been the first and the most auction-centric city. So I think that will be an interesting one. We'll have another chat maybe in January, February, Pete, and have a look at the wash-up of the data, because we both know that there's always data lag as well. Election year, I think we'll see some cruddy policies being pushed out next year, but I do feel that our market will continue to do well. And as our borders reopen, particularly Melbourne and Sydney, we'll see that take-up of residential property will be really strong. So our supply and demand equation's not going to moderate, in my opinion. You mentioned building starts. It's really hard to get a builder, and it's really hard to get building materials. So we're going to see extended project timelines, and we'll see things slowed down, and it is a frustration. And what we're seeing at the coalface is people who would have extended or built are saying, I don't want to wait it out that long or pay that fee to that builder for that quote. I'm just going to sell and buy something else. And I've even seen builders say, if that's when you need it, I reckon you should just go and buy something. So we'll see some sales that are precipitated from buyer impatience, or from owner impatience to wait it out for builders. It is a real problem. We've got a building and a materials shortage at the moment, and that can't be eradicated overnight because these things take time. Now, the Australian property market over the next 10 years, that's a harder crystal ball. But what I do think is we have amazing regulators, and we've got a real focus on not tanking the Australian property market. And there are lots of levers that we can see being pulled when things need to be changed. I think that international trade and international relations will play a part in the way that our market continues to perform. And if things get hostile, or if the Australian government clamps down further on foreign investment, that will no doubt wash out and play a role in things. But our rate of population increase, even during a pandemic when we're not throwing open the doors and welcoming new arrivals, we haven't been going backwards. I think that we'll see some of our major regions continue to flourish, and that relates to urban planning models as well. If you have a look at any city and state, and particularly the major regionals, we've got a lot of funding and a lot of planning effort going into growing those regions. And we've seen it in New South Wales, Newcastle, Wollongong, the Central Coast. We're seeing it in Melbourne. We're seeing it in Geelong, Ballarat, Bendigo, and we've got other cities that are really flourishing as well. And it's across the board. It's not just in New South Wales and Victoria. So I think the regions will continue to perform stronger than they have in the past, but I don't think they'll continue to outperform the capital cities. And I also think that we'll start to get our heads around apartment living in time, because a lot of other cities have done that and done that really well. We've just had so much land available here, but I think people will recognise the importance of being connected. And as our infrastructure continues to deliver for us, I know our city is just a mess of cranes and roadworks and metro tunnel works, and we're really connecting our city. So I have a really positive outlook. And your last question about investors and where they should target, I don't think my advice has changed. You've got to look at your own cash flows. You've got to be honest with yourself. There's no point buying something that has a headline saying that it's yielding 10% rental returns if its management fees are 6.5%, then you've got rates on top of that. So it's always about the cash flow, what you've got and what you can work with. And not necessarily looking at lots of properties, but getting the best quality properties you can in a way that allows you to continue buying property. You can't max your borrowing capacity out with one heavy hitter and then be sad about it. You've actually got to do the maths.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of nuance I was talking about from speaking to somebody who's in the industry and at the coalface and seeing all these trends day to day. You can't do property analysis by spreadsheet. You've got to be out there seeing what goes on. And the construction woes is actually a really good case in point. And another interesting point you made there about apartment living, I totally agree. I think the global experience is that when cities go past 5 million, things start breaking. The infrastructure doesn't work, the traffic gets congested. Sydney has been through that over the past few years, and Melbourne's right on the cusp as well. And eventually, I think people come around to the idea of being close to amenities and good schools and so on. But as you touched on earlier on, there's new units that are sometimes cramped and high rise and not necessarily ideal. And there's other much more family friendly or appropriate for professionals, established units that'll be in much more demand. So we could probably talk all day about some of those trends, Kate, but sadly, I think we have to wrap it up there. So obviously, as we've gone through today, I mean, I think it's well known, you've always been one of Australia's elite top buyers agents and a flag bearer for the industry. And we've barely even talked about the benefits of using an expert buyer's agent such as yourself, but I think you can almost see from the content that it's self-explanatory. Just having someone like yourself to guide the buyer through the process and to pick the right properties and avoid the mistakes and the pitfalls, the value is pretty obvious. So give us a plug for Cate Bakos Property. Where can people go if they want to find out a bit more?
Well, thanks, Pete. CateBakos.com.au. So I'm Kate with a C, and from an SEO point of view, it works really well. I write a weekly blog. I'm always completely excited by the idea of a daily blog. I think that you do it so well, but no, mine's weekly. I do it on a Sunday, and I try and talk about stuff that's relevant each week. It might be an experience I've shared or something I've read or felt or seen. I also have the Property Diaries. It's a podcast that I run in-house, and I get to interview exciting people like you. And I work in Melbourne's inner west. So if anyone wants to have a chat about Victorian investment, I'll always welcome a conversation.
So while mere mortals are watching Married at First Sight or Big Brother, whatever else is on the TV these days, you're out there punching out the content every week and every day. So, Kate, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and look forward to catching up again soon. Cheers.
Pleasure's been mine. Thank you, Pete.
Thanks for listening to Pete's Property Podcast, powered by Buyers Buyers. Don't forget to subscribe and join us next time as Pete chats all things property with a new guest. And just a reminder that the information provided in this podcast is general advice only and doesn't take into account your personal financial situation or needs. You should always consult a licensed professional to discuss your individual personal circumstances.